The late afternoon sun slanted through the bay window of our dining room, casting long, dancing shadows across the polished oak floor. Our son, Owen, all of 4 years old, with a mop of unruly brown curls, was meticulously arranging his wooden blocks into a tower that defied gravity. The quiet concentration on his face, his tongue peeking out from the corner of his mouth, filled my heart with a profound, almost aching sense of peace. This was my world. This little boy, this sun-drenched room, and the man who would be walking through the door any minute. My husband, Chris. Our life together was a fortress I had carefully built, brick by loving brick, after years of uncertainty. We had fought so hard for this, for Owen. Our miracle. I glanced at the clock on the wall. 4:30. Chris would be home soon, and then the delicate piece of our afternoon would have to be packed away. Tonight was the night. Catherine's 70th birthday dinner. My mother-in-law. The thought alone was enough to make the muscles in my shoulders tighten. I ran a hand through my hair, taking a deep breath to steady my nerves. It was just a dinner, a few hours of strained smiles and polite conversation. I could do it, for Chris. The front door clicked open, and Owen's head snapped up. "Daddy!" he shrieked, his architectural marvel forgotten as he scrambled to his feet and launched himself toward the hallway. I heard Chris's deep, warm laugh as he scooped our son into his arms. The sound was my anchor. He appeared in the doorway, Owen clinging to his neck like a little koala. Chris's eyes, a gentle hazel that always seemed to find mine in a crowded room, were smiling, but there was a flicker of weariness behind them. "Hey, you," he said, his voice soft. He leaned in and kissed me, the familiar scent of his cologne a comforting presence. "Ready for the main event?" "As I'll ever be," I sighed, forcing a smile. "How was your day?" "Long," he admitted, setting Owen down. "Just thinking about tonight. Let's just try to keep things smooth, okay? No rising to the bait." "When do I ever?" I asked, a hint of an edge in my voice that I immediately regretted. It wasn't his fault his mother saw me as a rival for his affection, a permanent interloper in her perfectly curated family. "I know, honey. I know. You're a saint," he said, pulling me into a brief, reassuring hug. "I just want it to be a nice night for her. It's a big birthday." I nodded, resting my head against his chest for a moment. "Of course. For you." He was a good son, and I loved him for it, even when his loyalty was tested by a mother who weaponized her love. I looked over his shoulder at Owen, who was now explaining the complex engineering of his block tower to his father. In that moment, surrounded by my two boys, I felt invincible. I foolishly believed that our love, the pure and simple truth of our little family, was strong enough to withstand anything. I had no idea that the foundations of our fortress were built on sand, and that the woman we were going to honor was holding a match, ready to set our entire world on fire. The drive to Catherine's house was a study in escalating tension. Chris gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white, a stark contrast to his easygoing posture just an hour before. We drove in a silence that was heavier than any argument, the only sound the soft hum of the engine and Owen's quiet humming from his car seat in the back. I stared out the window as our cozy, tree-lined suburban neighborhood gave way to the sprawling, manicured lawns and imposing gates of Oak Hollow, the enclave where Catherine lived. Her house wasn't a home. It was a statement, a monument to her late husband's wealth and her own unyielding standards. "Remember," Chris said as he turned onto her long, winding driveway, his voice low and strained, "just smile and nod. Whatever she says, just let it roll off your back. Just smile and please, Julia. For me." "I will, Chris. I promise," I replied, my own voice barely a whisper. I felt like a soldier preparing for battle, rehearsing a strategy for survival. The house loomed before us, a sprawling colonial edifice of brick and marble, its windows lit with a cold, intimidating glow. It looked less like a place for a birthday party and more like a mausoleum. As Chris parked the car, I took one last deep breath of the free night air before plunging in. I smoothed down my silk dress and checked my reflection in the vanity mirror. My face was pale, my eyes overly bright. I looked like a defendant heading to her own trial. Chris came around to open my door, offering a hand. His palm was clammy. "She'll have my brother Luke there. He's a good buffer," he offered, as if trying to reassure himself as much as me. Luke, Chris's younger brother, a quiet, gentle soul who always seemed as uncomfortable in his mother's orbit as I was. I did feel a small measure of relief. Luke was kind. He had a way of deflecting Catherine's sharpest barbs with a soft-spoken word or a change of subject. We walked up the stone pathway, Owen's small hand tucked firmly in mine. The heavy oak door swung open before we could even ring the bell, revealing Catherine, poised and perfect in a tailored navy blue dress, a string of pearls at her throat. Her silver hair was coiffed into a flawless helmet, and her smile didn't reach her cold, calculating eyes. "Christopher, darling," she cooed, ignoring me completely as she embraced her son. "You're here!" She then looked down at Owen, her expression softening, but only slightly. "And you brought my grandbaby." The way she said grandbaby made it sound like a possession, a prize she had won. Finally, her gaze fell upon me. It was a slow, deliberate appraisal, from my shoes to my hair, and I felt every inch of it like a physical inspection. "Julia," she said, her tone flat and dismissive. "You came." The implication hung in the air. I hadn't expected you to. The battle had begun, and I hadn't even crossed the threshold. I forced a smile that felt like cracking plaster. "Of course, Catherine. Happy birthday." Inside, I felt a familiar, sickening dread coil in my stomach. This gilded cage was her arena, and we were all just players in her cruel, elaborate game. The interior of Catherine's home was as impressive and soulless as its exterior. Glistening marble floors, cavernous ceilings, and walls adorned with oversized formal portraits of the family, Chris and Luke as stiffly posed children, her late husband looking stern and powerful. It felt like walking through a museum dedicated to a life devoid of warmth. A handful of Catherine's friends, women of a similar age and disposition, mingled in the formal living room, their polite chatter and clinking glasses echoing in the vast space. "Luke! There you are," I said, my voice bright with genuine relief as I spotted him by the fireplace. He turned, and a warm, easy smile spread across his face, instantly softening his features. Luke shared Chris's height and build, but where Chris's energy was confident and direct, Luke's was quieter, more observant. He had kind eyes that crinkled when he smiled. "Julia! Owen! Hey, little man!" Owen immediately let go of my hand and ran to his uncle. Luke crouched down, meeting him at his level, and scooped him into a hug. "Look at you! You got so big!" he exclaimed, ruffling Owen's hair. There was an effortless affection between them that always warmed my heart. Luke was a natural with him, patient and playful in a way that even Chris, for all his love, sometimes struggled to be. Chris joined us, clapping his brother on the back. "Luke, good to see you. Thanks for coming." "Wouldn't miss it for the world," Luke said, his smile tightening just a fraction as he glanced toward his mother, who was holding court across the room. We all understood the unspoken sentiment. Who was holding court? These events were obligations, not pleasures. For the next hour, I played my part. I complimented Catherine on her home, on her dress, on the perfectly arranged canapes. I endured the thinly veiled condescension from her friends, who asked me questions about my little job, as if I were a curious pet. Through it all, Catherine watched me, a faint, knowing smirk playing on her lips. She would periodically glide over to our little group, making a comment designed to subtly undermine me. "Luke, dear, be careful with Owen. He's so boisterous. Julia allows him to be quite free-spirited," she said, her tone implying a lack of discipline on my part. "He's a happy kid, Mom," Luke replied smoothly, giving Owen a little wink. Later, as I was helping Owen get a glass of juice, she cornered me by the drink table. "That's a lovely dress, Julia," she began, her eyes sweeping over me. "Is it new? I do hope Chris isn't spending too extravagantly. Times are so uncertain." Each comment was a tiny paper cut, designed to make me bleed slowly. I could feel Chris watching us from across the room, a helpless, anxious expression on his face. He wanted me to be impervious, But he didn't understand that Catherine's cruelty wasn't a hailstorm you could just wait out. It was a poison, seeping into the air, and tonight the atmosphere was particularly thick with it. I could feel a storm brewing, a deep, unsettling pressure building behind the facade of this flawless birthday celebration. Dinner was an agonizingly formal affair. We were seated around a massive mahogany table that could have comfortably hosted 20. The table was set with heirloom china and silverware so heavy it felt like it was forged for giants. The conversation was stilted, punctuated by the clinking of cutlery and Catherine's occasional sharp laughter. I sat between Chris and an empty chair, with Owen on Chris's other side, growing sleepy as the hour wore on. Luke was seated directly across from me, and I found myself catching his eye, sharing small, silent glances of mutual endurance. Finally, after the main course had been cleared away, Catherine tapped her crystal water glass with a spoon. The sound cut through the low murmur of conversation, commanding immediate, absolute silence. She rose slowly from her seat at the head of the table, a regal and imposing figure. A practiced, benevolent smile was fixed on her face, but her eyes held a glint of something sharp and dangerous. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate this milestone with me," she began, her voice smooth and practiced. 70 years. It's quite a long time to reflect on one's life, on one's legacy. Her eyes swept the room, landing for a moment on Owen, who was dozing against Chris's shoulder. "And my greatest legacy, of course, is my family. My wonderful sons." She raised her glass toward Chris. My hand, holding my own wine glass, stilled. Here it comes, I thought. The obligatory praise before the inevitable, subtle jab. "I want to give a special toast to my eldest, Christopher," she said, her voice dripping with syrupy pride. "He has always been such a pillar of strength, so responsible. He has given me the greatest gift a mother could ask for, a grandchild to carry on the family name." I felt Chris tense beside me. He forced a tight smile, nodding at his mother. Catherine paused, letting the silence hang in the air for a beat too long. She took a small sip of her champagne, her eyes locking onto mine across the table. The benevolent mask slipped, revealing a flash of pure, unadulterated malice. "He's always been so generous," she continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial, yet carrying tone. "So willing to do whatever it takes for the family. He's so generous, he even let his brother father his child." The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. The air was sucked from the room. A collective, silent gasp seemed to ripple through the guests. Sucked from the room. My mind scrambled, trying to process the sentence, to twist it into something else, something that made sense. But it was clear, unambiguous, devastating. My gaze snapped from Catherine's triumphant, cruel face to Luke, whose skin had gone the color of ash. His eyes were wide with horror and disbelief. Then, I looked at my husband. Chris was staring at his plate, his face utterly shattered, a mask of shame and despair. He wouldn't look at me. He couldn't. The entire room went silent. A deep, profound, suffocating silence. In that terrible quiet, I heard the lie of my life. The secret that had been kept from me, spoken aloud as a toast. My hand, which had been holding my wine glass, went slack. I watched, as if in slow motion, as the glass tilted, the deep red wine sloshing over the rim, spilling like blood across the pristine white tablecloth. My dream home, my miracle baby, my perfect marriage. It was all a crime scene now, and I was the last to know. The sound of my wine glass shattering on the polished hardwood floor was like a gunshot in the dead silence. It broke the spell. A few of the guests gasped audibly. Someone muttered, "Oh, my word!" The pristine white tablecloth was now stained with a spreading dark red bloom, a visceral symbol of the wound that had just been torn open in the center of my life. My body was frozen, but my mind was screaming. He let his brother father his child. The words echoed, ricocheting off the walls of my skull. It wasn't just a secret, it was a conspiracy. Chris, the man I trusted with my soul. Luke, the kind, gentle uncle. And Catherine, the architect of this destruction, who now stood at the head of the table, her face a mask of feigned concern. "Oh, dear Julia, are you all right?" she asked, her voice laced with the same venom she had used to deliver the blow. I couldn't answer. I couldn't breathe. I looked at Chris, pleading with my eyes for him to deny it, to call his mother a liar, to stand up and rage against this obscene violation. But he remained slumped in his chair, a broken man, his face buried in his hands. His silence was the only confirmation I needed. It was the truth. A wave of nausea and vertigo washed over me. The opulent dining room, the faces of the shocked guests, the smug look on my mother-in-law's face. It all blurred into an unbearable tableau of my own humiliation. I had to get out. I had to get Owen out. My movements were stiff, robotic. I pushed my chair back, the legs scraping loudly against the floor. Every eye was on me. I walked around the table to Chris's side. He didn't look up. Gently, I lifted my sleeping son from his lap. Owen stirred, murmuring softly, and settled his warm, trusting body against my shoulder. His solid weight was the only real thing in a world that had just dissolved into chaos. He was my anchor, my truth, even if I no longer knew what that truth was. "Mother, what have you done?" I heard Luke choke out from across the table, his voice raw with fury and shame. I didn't wait to hear her reply. Clutching my son like a shield, I turned my back on all of them, on the shattered glass, the stunned faces, the ruins of my marriage, and walked out of the dining room. I kept my head high, my spine rigid, focusing on placing one foot in front of the other. I could feel their stares on my back, a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. I didn't care. The only thing that mattered was putting distance between myself and that toxic, suffocating room. I found an upstairs guest bedroom, a cold and impersonal space just like the rest of the house. I entered, closing the door behind me and turning the lock. The click of the bolt was a small, definitive sound in the crushing silence. I laid Owen down on the large, ornate bed, and he curled into a ball, instantly asleep again, beautifully oblivious. I sank to the floor beside him, my back against the bed, and finally, the fortress of my composure crumbled. My back against the tears came, hot and silent, a flood of grief not just for the lie, but for the beautiful, simple truth I thought I had. I don't know how long I sat on the floor, the plush carpet a cold comfort against my skin, my silent tears tracing paths down my cheeks. The shock had given way to a hollow, aching coldness. Each breath was a conscious effort. The trust I had placed in Chris, the absolute foundational belief in our partnership, had been pulverized. It wasn't the biology that gutted me. We had struggled with infertility for years. I would have moved mountains to have a child with him by any means necessary. It was the lie, the profound, intricate, and shared lie he had allowed me to live. A soft knock came at the door. "Julia!" It was Chris's voice, broken and tentative. "Julia, please, let me in." I didn't move. I didn't want to see him. I didn't want to hear the excuses. "Please, honey," he begged, his voice cracking. "Don't shut me out. Let me explain." With a deep, shuddering sigh, I pushed myself to my feet. My legs felt weak, unsteady. I walked to the door and turned the lock, then retreated to the far side of the room, putting as much space between us as possible. He pushed the door open and stood in the threshold, his face pale and tear-streaked. He looked completely undone. "Why?" The word was a raw whisper, torn from my throat. He took a step into the room, his hands raised in a pleading gesture. I was going to tell you. I swear I was. So many times." "When, Chris?" I asked, my voice gaining a bitter strength. "On his 18th birthday? On our 40th wedding anniversary? When was the right time to tell me our entire life was a performance, and I was the only one who didn't have the script?" "It wasn't like that," he choked out, shaking his head. "After the doctors told me that it was me, that it was impossible. I was broken. I felt like less of a man, like a failure." He looked over at Luke, who had followed him and was now standing anxiously in the hallway. "Luke offered. He said he'd do it, as a donor, anonymously. And my mother, she orchestrated it. She said it had to be a family secret, to protect the family name, To protect me. Protect you? I laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. She didn't do it to protect you. She did it so she would have a weapon to hold over our heads forever. And you let her. You chose to protect your pride and her sick secret over having an honest marriage with me. I was ashamed, he cried out, his voice raw with anguish. I was so terrified that you would look at me differently, that you wouldn't love me the same way. It was cowardly, I know it was. But I love you so much, and I was so scared of losing you. I stared at him. At this man, I thought I knew better than my own heart. The betrayal was so much deeper than I could have imagined. Don't you understand, Chris? I said, my voice dangerously quiet. I would have loved you through anything. Infertility, illness, failure, anything. But I cannot love a liar. You didn't just lie to me. You let me build my entire world on a falsehood. You watched me love our son, and you never told me that his uncle, that your brother. I couldn't finish the sentence. The pain was too immense. You made me a fool, and you let your mother hold the knife that she finally twisted into my back tonight. There is no us in that. There is only you and your mother, and the secrets you chose over me. I didn't sleep. I sat in a chair by the window, watching the moon travel across the inky sky, until the first pale gray light of dawn began to break. Beside me, Owen slept peacefully, his small chest rising and falling in an innocent, steady rhythm. In the quiet darkness of that cold, unfamiliar room, something inside me shifted. The grief, while still present, began to crystallize into a hard, clear resolve. The victim who had wept on the floor was gone. In her place was a mother who would protect her son, and a woman who would not allow herself to be broken by the cruelty of others. I would not be Catherine's casualty. I rose and dressed myself and a still sleepy Owen in the clothes we had worn the night before. They felt like a costume from a different life. Holding his hand, I walked out of the room and down the grand curving staircase. Catherine was in the vast sunlit kitchen, calmly sipping a cup of tea as if it were any other morning. She looked up as I entered, a flicker of surprise on her face that she quickly masked with a cool expression of authority. Chris and Luke were there too, sitting at the large kitchen island, their faces haggard from a sleepless night. The air was thick with unspoken words. I walked directly to Catherine, stopping just a few feet from her. I met her gaze without flinching. "You must be very proud of yourself," I said, my voice low and steady, devoid of the hysteria she was likely expecting. She raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "I have no idea what you're talking about, Julia. I was merely telling a story about my son's generous spirit." "Stop," I commanded, and the single word had enough force to make her blink. "The games are over, Catherine. I see you. I see exactly who you are. This was never about protecting Chris's pride or the family name. This was about power. It was your final, desperate attempt to prove that you still control him, that you control this family. You couldn't stand that he was happy with me, that we built a life without your permission. So you held on to this secret like a trump card, waiting for the perfect moment to destroy me." I glanced at Chris, who was watching me, his eyes wide. I turned my attention back to his mother. "You didn't destroy me. You just revealed yourself. You are a cruel, bitter woman, so consumed with your own ego that you would humiliate both of your sons and terrorize your own grandchild's mother just to feel important for one night. You didn't just wound me, Catherine. You wounded everyone. Look at them." She followed my gaze to her sons. Luke looked at her with an expression of pure disgust. Chris's face was a canvas of dawning, horrified realization, as if he was seeing his mother for the very first time. Not as a matriarch to be revered, but as the poison that had been sickening his life for years. "Your toast wasn't a celebration," I finished, my voice ringing with clarity in the silent kitchen. "It was an act of war, and you have lost." The smugness had vanished from her face, replaced by a nascent panic. Her power was derived from secrets and control, and I had just stripped her of both in the bright light of day. Catherine sputtered, trying to regain control. "How dare you speak to me this way in my own home?" "It's not your home I'm concerned with anymore," I said, cutting her off cleanly. I turned to Chris, my heart aching, but my resolve firm. I am taking our son, and I am leaving. I'm going back to our house, the one I thought was built on truth, and I am going to pack our things. Chris's face crumpled. Julia, no. Don't leave me. I'm not deciding the fate of our marriage right now, I told him, my voice softening slightly, but losing none of its steel. That is a decision for another day. But I am making a decision about today. I will not spend one more second in this house, under her roof. And you have a choice to make, Chris. Right now. You can stay here, in her world of secrets and manipulation, and let her continue to poison everything you touch. Or you can leave with me. You can come with your son and the wife you lied to, and we can begin the long, painful work of seeing if there is anything left to save. The choice is yours. I held his gaze, laying the ultimatum at his feet. This was his moment of truth. He could choose his mother's suffocating control, or the terrifying, uncertain freedom of an honest life with me. Catherine, seeing her grip on him slipping, began to weep. Christopher, she's turning you against me. After everything I've done for you. Chris looked from his mother's manufactured tears to my clear, unwavering eyes. He looked at Owen, who was hiding behind my legs, confused and scared. And in that moment, the spell of a lifetime was broken. Confused and scared, he stood up, his chair scraping against the marble floor. He walked over to us and knelt down, pulling Owen into his arms and holding him tight. I'm so sorry, buddy, he whispered into his hair. Then he stood and faced his mother, his back straighter than I had ever seen it. You didn't do this for me, Mom, he said, his voice shaking with a new, powerful conviction. You did this for you. Julia's right. It's always been for you. He took a deep breath. You wanted to be the most important person in my life. Congratulations. You just made sure you won't be in it at all. He took my hand, his grip firm and desperate. Let's go home, he said to me. Without another word, the three of us turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving Catherine standing alone in her sun-drenched, opulent prison. Luke gave me a single, profound nod of support and respect before he, too, turned his back on his mother. As we stepped out the front door into the cool, clean morning air, I knew our journey was far from over. The road ahead was fraught with broken trust and painful honesty. But for the first time, we were walking it together, out of the shadows and into the light. We had lost a fragile, perfect lie, but in its place, we had found the chance to build a difficult, messy, and magnificent new truth. And that was a foundation that could never be shaken.